Everyone laughed when his black ex-wife hugged him at the gala. Then the CEO handled her with pride. The muscle in his jaw tightened. 5 years ago, he'd refused to even hear her defense. Pressure from investors, from the board, from the media had made him choose his company over their marriage. Have you ever had to face someone who broke your heart in front of an audience? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. 5 years of silence shattered in an instant as she walked toward the man who had destroyed her name. Not with hatred, but with a smile that made the billion-dollar ballroom collectively gasp. Every eye in the room locked onto Danielle Rivers. Her emerald gown caught the light as she moved through Atlanta's elite like a knife through butter. Whispers followed her path across the polished marble floor of the Ritz-Carlton ballroom. Isn't that his ex-wife? The one who sold company secrets? She's got some nerve showing up here. Connor Whitford stood frozen on the stage, Lifetime Achievement Award clutched in his hand. The tech CEO's carefully crafted mask of indifference slipped for just a moment. A flicker of something unreadable crossing his face as Danielle approached. The cameras that had been documenting his triumph now swiveled frantically to capture what promised to be a public confrontation. Security guards stepped forward, but Connor raised his hand, stopping them with the subtle authority that had built his empire. When she reached him, Danielle did the unthinkable. She stepped forward and embraced him. The collective intake of breath from 500 guests sounded like a gust of wind. Connor didn't flinch. Instead, his arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer with practiced ease, as though they hadn't spent 5 years apart, as though she hadn't been publicly branded a traitor to his company. "You look good for someone who's about to lose everything," she whispered against his ear, her smile never faltering for the cameras. His fingers tightened almost imperceptibly at her waist. "You have 2 minutes to explain why you're here before security removes you." She pulled back, eyes meeting his with an intensity that momentarily transported them both to another time, before accusations and divorce papers, before her name became synonymous with corporate betrayal. "I finally found the proof," she said, voice low enough that only he could hear. "I know who framed me. I know who really stole your technology." The muscle in his jaw tightened. 5 years ago, he'd refused to even hear her defense. Pressure from investors, from the board, from the media had made him choose his company over their marriage. 2 minutes, he repeated, though something in his eyes had changed. She pressed a thumb drive into his palm, fingers lingering against his for a heartbeat longer than necessary. "They framed me." The 3 words she'd screamed at him years ago during their last fight. Only this time, she delivered them with calm certainty. Have you ever had to face someone who broke your heart in front of an audience? Would you choose revenge or something more calculated? Tell me in the comments what you do in Danielle's emerald heels. The moment stretched between them, a lifetime of what-ifs compressed into seconds. Around them, phones captured every frame, social media already exploding with speculation. This wasn't just a reunion, it was a declaration of war. "You have a choice," Danielle continued, stepping back. "Review what's on that drive tonight, or wake up tomorrow to find it in the hands of every tech journalist in the country." Connor slipped the drive into his pocket with the smooth motion of a man accustomed to high-stakes negotiations. The Remington Suite. 1 hour, he said, voice pitched for her ears alone. As she turned to leave, cameras tracked her every step. What the watching world didn't know was that the woman they had mocked and condemned for 5 years hadn't come seeking forgiveness. She had come armed with truth, a weapon far more dangerous than revenge. The same hands that had once tenderly traced every inch of her body had signed the documents that stripped her of everything: her marriage, her reputation, her career, and her voice. Danielle stood at the window of the Remington Suite, watching Atlanta's skyline sparkle below. Behind her, the door clicked open, then closed with decisive finality. She didn't turn around. She'd recognize his footsteps anywhere, confident, measured, controlled. Like everything else about Connor Whitford. "You watched the files," she said. Not a question. Yes. A single syllable, heavy with implications. She finally turned to face him. Connor had loosened his tie, though his posture remained rigid. The stance of a man who'd built walls so high he'd forgotten how to lower them. 5 years, Connor. Her voice remained steady despite the storm inside her. 5 years of being blacklisted from every tech company in the country. 5 years of reporters camping outside my mother's house in Savannah. 5 years of death threats from your devoted fans. His eyes, steel gray and once so familiar, swept over her face, searching for something. If this evidence is legitimate, if the word shot from her like a bullet, you still don't believe me? I'm being cautious. These accusations against my board members, the same board members who convinced you I was selling your precious algorithms. She moved toward him, heels clicking against marble like a countdown. The same men you trusted over your wife. The hotel suite felt suddenly small, charged with 5 years of unspoken accusations. Outside, Atlanta continued its glittering existence, oblivious to the reckoning happening 50 floors above. Connor placed a thumb drive on the glass coffee table between them. You could have sent this anonymously. Why the public appearance? Why now? Because I wanted to see your face. She moved closer. I wanted you to feel what I felt, exposed, vulnerable, judged by strangers. His jaw tightened. And now you have. What's next? Public humiliation? A tell-all book? What would you do if the person who knew every secret part of you suddenly became your greatest enemy? Have you ever been betrayed by someone who once cherished you? Drop a broken heart if you've survived that kind of heartbreak. Danielle laughed, the sound hollow. You still think this is about revenge? I'm here because someone tried to kill me last week. The same people who framed me are tying up loose ends. The revelation landed like a physical blow. Connor's carefully maintained facade cracked. What? She placed a folder on the table next to the thumb drive. Emails, voice recordings, bank transfers, physical evidence backing up the digital files. Your trusted board members didn't just frame me for corporate espionage. They've been selling your military-grade encryption to foreign entities. When I accidentally discovered their operation, they made me the scapegoat. Her eyes held his, unflinching. You have until morning to decide, Connor. Either we clear my name together, or I'll do it myself, and burn your empire to the ground in the process. The ultimatum hung between them like a live wire. Dangerous, electric, impossible to ignore. He built a technology empire on his ability to detect lies. Yet he'd missed the biggest deception of all, the calculated destruction of the only woman he'd ever truly loved. Connor's fingers moved across his tablet with practiced precision, scanning through document after document. Financial records, doctored emails, surveillance photos, all fabricated to create the perfect illusion of Danielle's guilt, all orchestrated by the people he'd trusted most. Victor approved this? The question escaped before he could contain it, disbelief coloring his voice. Across the suite, Danielle sat perched on an armchair, watching him with guarded eyes. Your mentor, your father figure, the man who told you to cut me loose to save the company. Connor's mind raced, reassessing 5 years of decisions through this new lens. Victor Crane had been more than a business partner. He'd been family. The only father figure Connor had known since his own father died in that Vermont garage, crushed beneath a car when Connor was just 16. I need verification, Connor said, his voice measured despite the earthquake happening inside him. Independent confirmation of these accusations. Of course you do. Danielle's bitter smile didn't reach her eyes. Still can't take me at my word. The presidential suite's expansive windows reflected their silhouettes against Atlanta's night skyline. Two people once joined as one, now standing on opposite sides of a granite countertop like opposing attorneys at trial. This isn't about trust, Connor said, though the words sounded hollow even to him. It's about building an airtight case. No, it's about you refusing to admit you were wrong. She stood, crossing to the minibar where she poured herself a whiskey neat. The action was so familiar, her drink of choice when stressed, a habit he'd once known as well as his own. 5 years ago, you had a choice between believing your wife or protecting your company. You chose the company without hesitation. The evidence was fabricated by people you trusted more than me. She took a sip, eyes never leaving his over the rim of the glass. That's what hurts the most, Connor. Not the divorce, not even the public humiliation. It's that after 3 years together, I still ranked below your board's approval. Have you ever discovered you were completely wrong about someone you judged harshly? What does it take for pride to surrender to truth? Share your experience below. His fingers stilled on the tablet. The data was damning, elaborate but unmistakable once he knew what to look for. A sophisticated frame job orchestrated by people with intimate knowledge of both Whitford Tech Systems and Connor's blind spots. "I need time," he said, voice suddenly hoarse with the first genuine emotion she'd heard from him in years. "You had 5 years," she replied, moving toward the door. "I'm giving you 5 hours." As she reached for the handle, his fingers closed around her wrist, the first time he'd initiated contact without cameras watching. The touch sent an electric current through them both, unwanted but undeniable. Danny Waite. The nickname slipped out. The one only he had ever used, the one that belonged to late nights and quiet mornings, to a time before betrayal. She froze, not pulling away but not turning back either. "If what you're showing me is true," he said carefully, "then we're both in danger. Serious danger. These people won't stop at framing you. If they realize you've come to me with evidence." "I know the risks," she interrupted, finally looking back at him. "The question is, do you care enough to finally do something about it?" The challenge hung between them. 5 years of pain compressed into a single question without an easy answer. The last time they were alone in a hotel room, they were husband and wife. Now they were reluctant allies with 5 years of unspoken words hanging between them like smoke. "We need to identify everyone involved," Connor said, his suit jacket discarded, sleeves rolled to his elbows as he created a digital map of connections on the suite's smart display. "Victor wouldn't act alone. He's always preferred to keep his hands clean." Danielle nodded, her own focus intense as she cross-referenced board meeting minutes with suspicious stock movements. James Patterson and Richard Chun were definitely part of it. The money trail leads through shell companies they both control. Papers and digital records scattered across the suite's living area, while the Atlanta skyline winked at them through floor-to-ceiling windows. The city lights a constellation of possibilities and pitfalls as they reconstructed the conspiracy that tore them apart. Hours passed in tense collaboration, their bodies gradually shifting closer without conscious intent. By 2 a.m., Danielle's heels lay abandoned under the coffee table. Connor's tie hung loosely around his neck, and they'd identified 4 board members definitively linked to the conspiracy. "They framed me because I accidentally accessed server logs during the Singapore project," Danielle said, the realization dawning as pieces clicked into place. "I wasn't looking for their backdoor program. I was troubleshooting the client portal." Connor's hand brushed hers as they both reached for the same document. Neither acknowledged the contact, though both felt the jolt. They needed a scapegoat, he agreed, voice rough from hours of talking and the proximity he was trying to ignore. Someone whose disgrace would distract everyone from looking deeper. And what better target than the CEO's wife? Bitterness edged her words. The woman from Savannah, whom many already thought had married above her station. When was the last time you had to work closely with someone who broke your heart? How did you handle the echo of what used to be? Comment below with your experience. Connor's eyes snapped to hers. No one who mattered thought that. Really? Not even when your mother called me a social climber at our engagement party. His jaw tightened. My mother has nothing to do with this. No, but her attitude reflected what others thought. I was never fully accepted in your world, Connor. That made me the perfect sacrifice. The truth of her words hung between them. Uncomfortable, but undeniable. The hotel room phone rang with jarring suddenness. Connor's head of security calling at 3 a.m. never meant good news. "What is it, Davis?" Connor answered, switching to speakerphone. "Sir, there's been a break-in at Ms. Rivers' Atlanta apartment. Professional job. Nothing taken but her laptop." Danielle's eyes widened, meeting Connor's across the room. "They know you're here," Connor said, his hand reaching for hers instinctively. "They know we're together." The way he said "together" made her pulse quicken, not with fear, but with something she'd sworn she'd never feel for him again. "We need to move," he continued, already gathering the evidence into his secure briefcase. "If they found your apartment, this hotel isn't safe either. Where can we go that Victor Crane can't find us?" Danielle asked, slipping her heels back on, emergency mode replacing exhaustion. Connor's expression shifted to something unreadable. "I know a place, somewhere they'd never think to look." When a bullet shatters the window of a penthouse suite, old lovers become new allies, because surviving the night means trusting the person who once betrayed you. They'd barely made it to the elevator when Connor's phone buzzed with an urgent alert from hotel security. "Motion detectors on the balcony," he muttered, pushing the button for the underground garage instead of the lobby. "How did they track us so quickly?" Danielle whispered as the elevator descended. "Someone at the gala must have tipped them off when they saw us together." Connor's hand rested protectively at the small of her back, guiding her when the doors opened. "My car's this way." They'd almost reached the Aston Martin when the elevator behind them pinged. Two men in hotel uniforms emerged, their movements too purposeful, eyes scanning with predatory focus. "Down," Connor ordered, pulling Danielle behind a concrete pillar seconds before a muffled shot ricocheted off the car where they'd been standing. Glass exploded inward like diamonds across the plush carpet, Connor's body covering hers before conscious thought intervened. Muscle memory from a time when shielding her had been as natural as breathing. "The service exit," Danielle gasped, pointing toward a door partially hidden behind a maintenance cart. They moved as one, years of separation dissolving in the face of immediate danger. Connor's hand gripped hers tightly as they burst through the exit into a rain-slicked alley. "This way," he urged, leading her through a maze of service corridors and back entrances he somehow knew by heart. His fingers remained interlaced with hers, warm despite the adrenaline, steady despite the chaos. 2 blocks away, a nondescript SUV waited in an employee parking lot behind a restaurant. "Contingency vehicle," Connor explained as they climbed in. "Davis maintains them in every city I do business." "You've planned for being hunted?" Danielle asked, breathless from their escape. "I've planned for everything." His grim expression said more than his words as he navigated them out of the city center, taking random turns to ensure they weren't followed. "Has danger ever forced you to trust someone you swore you'd never rely on again? What's stronger, pride or survival? Tell me your thoughts below." Rain began to fall, transforming Atlanta's lights into watery smears across the windshield. Inside the vehicle, tension thickened with each mile. "They're willing to kill us," Danielle said, breaking the silence. "This goes beyond corporate espionage." Connor's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "The military contracts, the technology they stole has national security implications." His eyes met hers briefly. "I'm sorry, Danny. I never thought that your precious board members would be willing to commit murder." Her laugh held no humor. "Neither did I." They drove north out of the city, leaving the sprawl of Atlanta behind for the darker roads leading into the mountains of North Georgia. The SUV's headlights cut through mist that grew thicker as they climbed in elevation. "Where are we going?" Danielle finally asked as pine trees replaced office buildings. Connor hesitated. "Somewhere safe, somewhere private." We finally turned onto an unmarked gravel road. Danielle felt a jolt of recognition. The winding path through towering pines, the glimpse of moonlight on water beyond the trees. She knew this place. The SUV's headlights illuminated a rustic wooden structure nestled against the shoreline of a mountain lake. The cabin where they'd spent their honeymoon. "No one knows about this place," he explained, not meeting her eyes as the engine died. "I never sold it." The revelation hung between them. For 5 years while she struggled to rebuild her life, he'd kept their sanctuary untouched, preserved like a museum to what they'd lost. She stepped into their honeymoon cabin and found everything exactly as they'd left it 5 years ago, including the champagne glasses on the nightstand from the last morning they'd woken up happy. "The power still works," Connor said, flipping switches that illuminated the open concept living area. The modern amenities contrasted with the rustic log walls. High-end comfort nestled in wilderness, just as she remembered. Danielle moved through the space like a ghost, revisiting its haunting grounds. Her fingers traced the kitchen counter where they'd made midnight snacks, brushed against the leather sofa where they'd talked for hours watching the lake through picture windows. "You kept everything," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Connor busied himself checking the security system, a new addition since their time here. "I come up every few months for maintenance." "But you never changed anything." His shoulders tensed, but he didn't turn around. "No." Moonlight spilled through pine trees onto the wraparound porch where they'd once slow danced at midnight, the wooden swing still hanging from rusted chains, a physical metaphor for their relationship, weathered but somehow still intact. "I'll grab some things from the car," Connor said, retreating before the conversation could venture into more dangerous territory. Alone, Danielle found herself drawn to the hallway leading to the bedroom. Her feet moved of their own accord, heart pounding as she pushed open the door. The master bedroom remained frozen in time. The same quilted comforter where they'd spent lazy Sunday mornings, the same oversized tub where they'd shared both laughter and passion. "I'll take the couch," Connor said from behind her, making her jump. He stood in the doorway, overnight bag in hand, eyes carefully avoiding the bed they'd once shared. What would you feel walking into a place filled with memories of love that once seemed perfect? Would you remember the joy or focus on the pain that followed? Share your experience in the comments. "There's food in the freezer," he continued, his businessman voice replacing the momentary vulnerability. "And the generator will kick in if the storm knocks out power." Danielle nodded, unable to form words as emotions threatened to overwhelm her carefully maintained composure. Later, after a silent meal of reheated pasta, she retreated to the bedroom while Connor made calls to his head of security, speaking in the coded language of a man accustomed to crisis. She found the photo album in the drawer of her nightstand. Pictures from their courtship, wedding, early marriage, with handwritten notes added in Connor's precise handwriting dating after their divorce. Danny's favorite restaurant in Savannah, closed 2018. Our first anniversary. Didn't know it would be our only one. Last photo together, tech conference in Austin. The last page held a letter addressed to her, but never sent, beginning with words that made her hand tremble. "If I made the biggest mistake of my life, how do I even begin to ask for forgiveness?" The cabin creaked around her as the storm intensified, rain lashing against windows that had witnessed both their beginning and their end. Outside, nature unleashed its fury on the mountains. Inside, a different kind of storm was brewing, one 5 years in the making and impossible to outrun any longer. Under threat of death and surrounded by evidence of what they'd once meant to each other, two people who'd once shared everything finally spoke the truth and realized their entire divorce had been built on calculated lies. "You wrote this." Danielle stood in the doorway to the living room, the unsent letter in her hand. Not an accusation, a statement of fact that demanded explanation. Connor looked up from his laptop, thunder punctuating the moment with perfect dramatic timing. "You weren't supposed to find that." When? A year after the divorce, when the first inconsistencies in the evidence started appearing. He closed the computer, facing her fully. "I hired private investigators. They couldn't find anything conclusive, but they raised enough questions that I started to doubt. But you never contacted me." The hurt in her voice was raw, unfiltered by time or pride. "What would I have said? Sorry I destroyed your life, but I'm starting to think maybe you weren't guilty after all." His laugh was hollow. "By then, the damage was done. Your reputation was ruined. Mine was rebuilt. The company had moved on." Rain lashed against the cabin windows as thunder rolled across the lake. Nature's percussion matching the emotional storm brewing inside as 5 years of silence finally shattered between them. "Did you ever ask yourself why I didn't fight harder?" Danielle moved closer, the letter clutched in her hand. "Why I signed the divorce papers without contesting anything." Connor's eyes searched hers. "I assumed you wanted a clean break. They threatened my mother." The confession tumbled out 5 years too late. "Victor visited me privately, said if I fought the accusations or the divorce, my mother's nursing home would suddenly have reason to discharge her. That the MS medication she depends on would mysteriously be denied by her insurance. Connor's face drained of color. Victor threatened your family? The great Victor Crane, your mentor and father figure. Bitterness edged her words. He made it very clear the price of fighting back was too high. The revelation hung between them, reshaping everything that had come after. Have you ever discovered that what ended a relationship was based on misunderstanding or manipulation? How do you forgive lost years? I want to hear your stories below. I should have known. Connor stood, moving to the window where lightning illuminated the churning lake. I should have questioned why you gave in so easily. The Danielle I knew would have fought with everything she had, unless I was protecting someone I loved more than my own reputation. She set the letter on a coffee table. So now you know, we were both manipulated. The storm outside reached its peak, rain hammering against the roof like nature's own accusation. I should have trusted you, he finally admitted, voice barely audible above the storm. I should have fought for us. The confession she'd waited 5 years to hear hung between them as lightning illuminated the room, revealing tears on his face. Before conscious thought intervened, she found herself crossing the space between them, her hand reaching for his cheek in the gesture that had once been as natural as breathing. Her palm against the skin bridged 5 years of separation in an instant. Connor remained perfectly still, as though afraid any movement might shatter this fragile moment of connection. We can't change what happened, Danielle said softly, but we can make them pay for what they took from us. His hand covered hers, warm and solid. Yes, we can. The simple agreement contained multitudes, acknowledgement of wrong, commitment to justice, and something else neither was ready to name, but both could feel crackling between them like the lightning outside. One touch broke 5 years of carefully constructed walls, her fingers on his face, his hand covering hers, and suddenly the pain between them transformed into something far more dangerous. Possibility. Connor's eyes held hers, the question in them requiring no words. Danielle knew she should step back, maintain the professional distance that self-preservation demanded. Instead, she found herself drawn closer, as though the years apart had been nothing but a brief interruption. We shouldn't, she whispered, even as her body betrayed her words. I know. His voice was rough, hands hovering at her waist without quite touching, giving her the choice he denied her 5 years ago. The firelight painted gold across their skin as the distance between them disappeared, not with the desperate passion of strangers, but with the reverent recognition of two people rediscovering familiar territory, forever altered by time and pain. His fingers traced her collarbone with familiar reverence, pausing at the hollow of her throat where her pulse raced beneath his touch. Is this okay? He whispered, the powerful suddenly uncertain. Her answer came not in words, but in the arch of her body toward his, bridging years of separation with a gravitational pull they'd never truly escaped. The first kiss was tentative, a question, an apology, a recognition of all they'd lost. The second was certainty, hunger, 5 years of denial crumbling in an instant. Clothes fell away, each layer removed, revealing not just skin, but vulnerability neither had allowed themselves since their separation. His hands remembered her body with aching precision, the curve of her waist, the sensitive spot below her ear that made her gasp. I never stopped, Connor began against her neck, but she pressed fingers to his lips. Don't say it. Not yet. She couldn't bear promises or declarations that reality might shatter by morning. What's more powerful? The first time with someone new, or the return to someone who once knew every inch of you? Share your thoughts on rekindling versus new beginnings. Thunder crashed outside as they moved together on the bearskin rug before the fireplace, the storm matching their intensity. Years of anger and hurt transformed into something else. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. Recognition. Connection that transcended the physical even as their bodies remembered exactly how to move together. Afterward, they lay tangled in the blanket Connor had pulled from the sofa, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. The fire cast dancing shadows across their intertwined forms. The only sound their gradually slowing breaths and the rain against the windows. The harsh ring of Connor's secure phone shattered their bubble. His expression transformed as he listened, CEO mask sliding back into place. "What is it?" Danielle asked when he ended the call, reading the tension in his body. "They've called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning," he said, eyes meeting hers with renewed urgency. "They're voting to remove me as CEO. We need to get back to Atlanta now." Reality crashed back like a cold wave. The real battle was about to begin, and they just complicated everything by crossing a line they couldn't uncross. "What's the play?" she asked, already reaching for her clothes, strategy replacing intimacy with practiced efficiency. Connor's eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary, acknowledgement passing between them that what had happened wouldn't be dismissed or forgotten. "We go on offense," he said simply. Together, they'd spent the night rediscovering each other's bodies. Now they had 12 hours to reclaim her reputation and save his company before the same people who destroyed their marriage eliminated them permanently. Dawn broke over Atlanta as Connor's private elevator opened directly into his downtown penthouse. Unlike the cabin's preserved nostalgia, this space was all glass and steel, a command center for the digital empire he'd built. "Davis is bringing in a security team," Connor said, transforming the living room into an operations hub with practiced efficiency. "We need to assume the entire board is compromised until proven otherwise." Danielle nodded, already connecting her laptop to the wall of displays. "We'll need proof that's impossible to dismiss or bury. Public enough that killing us becomes pointless." The private conference room in Connor's Atlanta penthouse transformed into a war room. Digital displays tracking stock movements, security footage identifying conspirators, while outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, dawn broke over the city that had witnessed both their rise and fall. "The military contracts are key," Connor said, pulling up project files that required his biometric authorization. "They didn't just want my algorithms, they wanted access to defense systems." Danielle's fingers flew across her keyboard. There's a pattern in the server access logs. Every major data breach happened during quarterly board reviews when all members had elevated system privileges. They worked in seamless tandem, finishing each other's thoughts, anticipating needs before they were voiced. The professional synchronicity they'd once been famous for now serving a different purpose. When Connor's head of security arrived with reinforcements, he paused momentarily at the sight of them working together, a knowing glint in his eyes that he quickly masked with professional detachment. "I brought in people I personally vetted," Davis said, setting up his own workstation. "No connections to the board or Crane." "Good." Connor didn't look up from his screen. "We need eyes on all board members, especially Patterson, Chun, and Rosenthal. Have you ever had to work professionally alongside someone you're intimately involved with? How do you balance business and pleasure when the stakes are this high? Share your experience below." Hours passed in strategic planning. Connor arranged for key journalists to receive encrypted document packages triggered to unlock if anything happened to him or Danielle. Meanwhile, she reconstructed the money trail, connecting shell companies to offshore accounts. "We need to get inside the building before the meeting," Danielle said, studying the security protocol she'd once helped design. "Plant backup evidence in case they've purged the servers." Connor's hand brushed hers as he reached for his coffee, the casual contact sending electricity through them both despite the high-stakes focus. "I still have master access. If we go in at 5 a.m., security will be minimal." "I'll go with you," Davis said, holstering his weapon with subtle emphasis. The plan took shape, methodical, thorough, accounting for contingencies and escape routes. By late afternoon, they'd build a case that would be impossible to dismiss. As they finalized their strategy, Connor's head of security burst in with breaking news. Board member James Patterson had just been found dead in his home, an apparent suicide with a damning note confessing to framing Danielle. "This isn't a suicide," Connor said, eyes meeting Danielle's across the table. "They're tying up loose ends." Her phone buzzed with an incoming text from an unknown number. "You're next. Both of you." The message confirmed what they already knew. Someone was panicking, eliminating conspirators to protect the mastermind. They're accelerating their timeline, Danielle said, a cold certainty settling in her chest. Patterson was silenced because he was the weak link. Connor's expression hardened into something dangerous. Then we accelerate too. We move tonight. Outside, the sun began to set over Atlanta, the city unknowingly watching the opening moves of a chess game where the pieces were billion-dollar secrets and the stakes were their lives. 5 years ago, they destroyed her name with lies that circled the globe in minutes. Today, they would reclaim her truth with a broadcast that would shake Silicon Valley to its core. The cameras in the boardroom were installed during last month's renovation, Connor explained as they prepared for their counterattack. Every board member's facial expression and voice will be recorded and analyzed in real time. Danielle adjusted her earpiece, the familiar weight of purpose steadying her nerves. The evidence packets are scheduled to send to the FBI, SEC, and 3 major tech journals if we don't hear the cancellation code every 30 minutes. The sky outside had barely begun to lighten when their small team moved through the empty Whitford Tech headquarters. Security guards nodded respectfully to Connor, unaware of the power struggle about to erupt in their gleaming glass fortress. "Remember," Connor said as they rode the executive elevator to the top floor, "they don't know how much we know. Let them incriminate themselves." His hand found hers in the elevator's privacy, squeezing once. Not just reassurance, but promise. Whatever happened today, they faced it united. The Whitford Tech headquarters gleamed like a glass fortress against the Atlanta skyline, employees and security parting before them like a modern royal couple. The CEO everyone feared and the woman everyone had underestimated, walking in perfect step toward the boardroom where enemies awaited. Board members arrived one by one, surprise registering on their faces at the sight of Danielle seated confidently at Connor's right hand. Richard Chen's eyes narrowed with barely concealed hostility. Elizabeth Rosenthal's practiced smile faltered momentarily. "Quite the unexpected guest, Connor," Rosenthal said, voice honey-sweet with underlying venom. "Ms. Rivers is here as my consultant on security matters," Connor replied smoothly. "Given recent events, I thought her expertise would be valuable. What would you do if you had the chance to face those who tried to destroy you, with the person who once abandoned you now standing by your side? Would you trust them?" Comment below with your thoughts. As 9 board members settled into their chairs, Connor's assistant approached with an urgent message. "Sir, Mr. Crane sends his regrets. He's unable to attend in person, but requests your presence at his estate following the meeting." The assistant handed Connor a note, which he read with an unreadable expression before passing it to Danielle. The handwritten words made her blood run cold. "I've always considered you a son, Connor. Don't make me treat you like an enemy. Bring her to me alone." Their eyes met in silent communication. Victor Crane, the mastermind orchestrating from a safe distance, exactly as they'd suspected. Connor rose to address the board, his presence commanding complete attention. "Before we begin the vote you've all so urgently called, there's something we need to discuss." With the press of a button, the boardroom's displays lit up with evidence, emails, financial transfers, server logs, methodically connecting each person in the room to the conspiracy. 5 years ago, Ms. Rivers was accused of corporate espionage. Connor continued, his voice steady. "Today, we'll correct that record and address the actual espionage that's been happening under our noses." Richard Chun lunged for the door, only to find Davis blocking his path. Elizabeth Rosenthal's perfectly manicured nails dug into the leather armrests of her chair. The boardroom doors swung open to reveal 12 of the most powerful people in tech staring back at them. But the 13th chair, belonging to Connor's mentor and company co-founder Victor Crane, sat conspicuously empty. The real confrontation, they both knew, was yet to come. The mansion that had hosted their engagement party now welcomed them with armed guards. The father figure who had blessed their marriage revealed as the architect of its destruction. Victor Crane's Buckhead estate sprawled across manicured acres, old money confidence embedded in its columns and courtyards. The perfect setting for a man who believed himself untouchable, who collected people's loyalty like fine art only to discard them when convenience demanded. "Stay close to me," Connor murmured as the ornate front doors swung open. His hand rested protectively at the small of Danielle's back, the gesture both reassuring and possessive. Inside, the marble foyer gleamed under crystal chandeliers that had witnessed decades of Atlanta power brokering. A stone-faced housekeeper led them through corridors lined with museum-quality artwork to Crane's private study. Victor Crane stood with his back to them, a tumbler of bourbon in one hand as he gazed out over his immaculate gardens. At 72, he remained imposing, silver hair perfectly coiffed, shoulders straight beneath his bespoke suit. "Connor." He turned, smile not reaching his eyes. "And Danielle. How lovely to see you again after all this time." "Skip the pleasantries, Victor." Connor's voice held none of the deference he'd once shown his mentor. "We know everything." Crane's laugh was genuinely amused. "Do you?" "I doubt that very much." He gestured to the leather chair's position before his massive desk. "Please sit. We have much to discuss." Danielle remained standing, unwilling to accept even the pretense of hospitality. "You framed me. You threatened my mother. You destroyed my life. I protected billions in government contracts." Crane's dismissive shrug reduced her suffering to a business necessity. Connor was becoming too idealistic. His focus on consumer privacy would have jeopardized our military partnerships. "So you manufactured evidence against his wife?" The words burned in her throat. "Turned him against me to maintain control. It worked beautifully." Crane sipped his bourbon. "Until now. Have you ever discovered someone you trusted completely was manipulating you all along? How did you handle that betrayal? Share your experience in the comments." "The board meeting didn't go as planned," Connor said, voice dangerously calm. "Chun and Rosenthal are already in FBI custody. Patterson's suicide is being reinvestigated as murder." Something flickered across Crane's face, the first hint of concern breaking through his confidence. Unfortunate developments, but hardly conclusive. With practiced ease, he pressed a button beneath his desk. The study door opened as 4 men in security uniforms entered, their bulging jackets leaving little doubt about their weapons. "Your father would be disappointed, Connor." Crane's voice hardened. He understood sacrifice for the greater good. "Don't you dare speak about my father." Connor's hands clenched into fists. "He was nothing like you." Crane's security surrounded them as he revealed the final piece of his plan. Digital evidence modified to suggest Danielle and Connor had conspired together against the company from the beginning. "Your choice is simple," Crane said, swirling bourbon in his crystal tumbler. "Sign these papers transferring control to me, or face federal charges together." His smile never reached his eyes as he added, "I gave you both a chance 5 years ago when I only targeted her. Don't make me destroy you both now." He slid documents across the polished desk surface. "Full immunity for me and my associates. Your signatures transferring controlling interest in Whitford Tech to my holding company. In exchange, you both walk away, alive if not wealthy." Connor met Danielle's eyes, a silent conversation passing between them. The same look they'd exchanged in the boardroom earlier, when they'd activated the final phase of their own plan. A plan Victor Crane knew nothing about. With guns aimed at their heads and 5 years of separation behind them, they exchanged a look that needed no words. They would rather risk everything together than survive apart through surrender. "You win, Victor." Connor's shoulders slumped with convincing defeat as he reached for the pen. "You always do." Crane's smile widened, satisfaction gleaming in his eyes as he watched his protege prepare to sign away his life's work. A wise decision. Self-preservation was always your father's strong suit too. Danielle's hand trembled as she accepted the pen Connor passed to her. "Everything we built," she whispered, the picture of a woman broken once again. Crystal decanters and southern gentility created surreal contrast to the tension vibrating through the room. Crane's confidence and armed guards against Connor and Danielle's calculated desperation, a high-stakes chess match played with lives and legacies. "You should know," Connor said casually as his pen hovered over the signature line. Davis activated Protocol Lazarus an hour ago. The name meant nothing to Danielle, but Crane's reaction was immediate, his bourbon glass freezing halfway to his lips. "You're bluffing," Crane said, though uncertainty had crept into his voice. The board meeting was broadcast live to the FBI Cybercrime Division. Connor's pen finally touched paper, though he didn't yet sign. Every confession, every piece of evidence, streamed in real time to federal agents. Impossible. The boardroom is electronically shielded. It was, Danielle interjected, until I updated the security systems last night. Amazing what you can do with the CEO's master access codes. What would you risk to clear your name after years of injustice? Would you gamble everything, even your life, for vindication? Tell me what you think in the comments. Sign the papers, Crane snapped, nodding to his guards who stepped closer, hands moving inside their jackets. Connor signed with a flourish, then slid the document to Danielle. She signed as well, hands steady now that they'd crossed the point of no return. The moment Connor signed the transfer papers, sirens wailed in the distance. The broadcast they'd secretly initiated had worked, authorities responding to the live stream evidence. Crane's expression shifted from triumph to fury as he realized their deception. "You think this ends with me?" he snarled, reaching inside his jacket. "You've forgotten who really built this empire." The gunshot echoed through the mansion before either could react. But it wasn't Connor or Danielle who fell. One of Crane's own security guards crumpled to the floor, blood blooming across his chest. In the doorway stood Davis, Connor's head of security, weapon trained on the remaining guards. "Federal agents are surrounding the property," Davis announced calmly. "I suggest everyone remain very still." The other guards, recognizing the futility of resistance, slowly raised their hands. Crane's face contorted with rage. "This changes nothing. Those signatures are legally binding." "About that," Connor said, picking up the document. "You should read what we actually signed." The paper wasn't a transfer of company ownership, but a full confession, detailing Crane's conspiracy, threats, and orchestration of murder, signed by the two key witnesses to his crimes. "You taught me to always read the fine print, Victor." Connor's smile held no warmth. "Consider this my final lesson from you." Outside, red and blue lights flashed through the windows as federal agents swarmed the property. The chess match was over. Checkmate. The same media outlets that had once crucified her now scrambled to tell her story of vindication. While behind closed doors, she and Connor faced the hardest question of all. Could a love destroyed by betrayal truly be rebuilt? Tech titan Victor Crane arrested on conspiracy charges, screamed the headlines. Whitford whistleblowers expose corporate espionage ring. Danielle Rivers cleared after 5-year nightmare. Cameras flashed like strobe lights as they emerged from FBI headquarters, Connor's hand firmly clasping hers. No longer the possessive grip of a powerful CEO, but the supportive touch of a partner facing the world's judgment together for the second time in their lives. "Ms. Rivers, how does it feel to be vindicated after 5 years?" a reporter shouted. Danielle faced the press with the poise she'd never lost, despite everything. The truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deep people try to bury it. For 10 days, they barely had a moment alone. Federal investigations, emergency board meetings, press conferences, the machinery of justice and corporate damage control consumed every waking hour. Through it all, they moved in perfect synchronization, their professional partnership rebuilt with surprising ease. The personal reconnection they'd begun at the cabin remained unaddressed. A conversation delayed by necessity, but growing more urgent with each passing day. When they finally returned to Connor's penthouse after the last press conference, exhaustion hit them both like a physical weight. "It's over," Connor said, loosening his tie as the elevator doors closed behind them. "Really over." Danielle stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, city lights twinkling below. "Is it?" The question hung between them, laden with meaning that had nothing to do with Victor Crane or corporate espionage. Is vindication enough to heal past wounds? Can trust truly be rebuilt after complete betrayal? Share your thoughts on whether some breaks can actually make a relationship stronger. They barely made it through his penthouse door before her back met the wall, his mouth capturing hers with 5 years of regret and renewed hope. "We won," he whispered against her neck, hands rediscovering the curves he'd memorized long ago. "Together," she affirmed, fingers threading through his hair, pulling him closer with the certainty that had replaced her doubt. Their bodies remembered each other. Every touch, every response. But this wasn't the tentative reconnection at the cabin. This was celebration, affirmation, mutual claiming. His hands lifted her against the wall, her legs wrapping around his waist with practiced ease. "Bedroom," she gasped between kisses. "Too far," he growled, carrying her instead to the sofa. Clothes fell away, impatience making them clumsy until finally there was nothing between them but skin and history, both the painful and precious parts. Later, wrapped in a throw blanket from the sofa, they watched the city lights through the windows. Their bodies were sated, but the larger questions remained unanswered. "The board wants me to stay," Connor said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Rebuild the company's reputation." "Of course they do. You're the hero now." His fingers traced idle patterns on her shoulder. "What about you? What do you want?" As morning light streamed through the penthouse windows, reality intruded on their reconnection. "I need to rebuild my life," she said, fingers tracing patterns on his chest. "And my career." The unspoken question hung between them. Would that life include him? His phone buzzed with an incoming call from the board, demanding decisions about the company's future. 2 lives, 2 careers, 2 paths. Could they truly converge again after everything? "I've had offers," she admitted. "Tech firms in California, some in New York." Connor's body tensed beside her, though his voice remained neutral. "Good ones." "Very good." She propped herself up to look at him directly. "But that's not the point." "What is the point, Danny?" "The point is figuring out if we're really doing this again. If we're worth fighting for." 5 years ago, ambition and betrayal tore them apart. Now success and vindication forced them to decide if they were brave enough to risk their hearts a second time. "Google wants me to head their new cybersecurity division," Danielle said, reviewing the offer letter that had arrived by courier. "Base in Mountain View, with teams in Singapore and London." Connor nodded, his expression carefully neutral as he poured coffee in his penthouse kitchen. 2 weeks had passed since Crane's arrest. 2 weeks of rebuilding Whitford Tech's leadership while fielding their own separate opportunities. "That's an impressive package," he acknowledged, the businessman evaluating the offer rather than the man contemplating what it meant for them. The rebuilt Whitford Tech boardroom gleamed with new energy, Connor at the head of the table presenting his vision for the company's future, while across town, Danielle fielded offers from competitors who finally recognized her brilliance, 2 separate worlds that once again threatened to pull them in opposite directions. "The board approved my restructuring plan," Connor said later that evening, loosening his tie as he joined her on the balcony. "We're refocusing on consumer privacy, scaling back the defense contracts." "Your original vision," Danielle noted before Crane derailed it. "Our original vision," he corrected gently. Atlanta spread below them, the city that had witnessed both their rise and fall, now the backdrop for whatever came next. The air between them felt charged with unspoken questions neither was brave enough to ask first. What would you choose? Professional opportunity that might mean geographic separation, or compromising career goals to maintain a relationship? Have you faced this choice? Share your experience below. "I've been thinking about the Google offer," Danielle finally said, breaking the silence. Connor's fingers tightened around his whiskey glass. "It's a great opportunity. 3,000 miles away." "Yes." The simplicity of his response frustrated her. After everything they'd been through, the reconnection, the vindication, the night spent relearning each other, how could he be so calm about potential separation? "That's all you have to say?" she challenged. "What do you want me to say, Danny?" His calm finally cracked. "That I want you to stay? That I'm terrified of losing you again when we've barely found our way back?" "Of course I am." "Then fight for me," she whispered. "Like you did 5 years ago." His expression softened as he set down his glass and moved toward her. "I want you to take it," he said, voice steady despite the cost. "You've earned this." Her heart contracted at his willingness to let her go again, until he added words that changed everything. "But I want you to know I'll follow you anywhere, if you'll let me. The company, Atlanta, none of it matters without you." The competing job offer would take her to Silicon Valley, 3,000 miles from Atlanta and Connor's rebuilt empire. But his words reframed everything. "What are you saying?" she asked, needing absolute clarity after years of misunderstanding. "I'm saying I can run Whitford Tech from California just as easily as Atlanta. I'm saying I'm not making the same mistake twice." His hands framed her face with gentle reverence. "I'm saying that no company, no city, no amount of success matters if we're not together." Outside, Atlanta continued its evening rhythm, unaware of the moment unfolding 50 floors above. Inside, two people who had lost everything and fought their way back stood at another crossroads, this time with eyes wide open. "Are you sure?" she whispered. "Your life is here." "No," Connor said simply. "My life is with you, wherever that takes us." The same ballroom that witnessed their public reunion now hosted a different kind of ceremony. Not an industry award, but a vow renewal where two people who had lost everything found something greater in the ashes of what they burned. "Do you remember what you whispered to me a year ago in this room?" Connor asked, adjusting his cufflinks as they prepared to enter the Ritz-Carlton ballroom. "When you walked up during my award speech," Danielle smiled, smoothing the emerald gown that matched the one she'd worn that night. "I believe it was, 'You look good for someone who's about to lose everything.'" "Turns out I didn't lose everything," he replied, lifting her hand to his lips. "I found what matters most." The Ritz-Carlton ballroom had been transformed from corporate showcase to intimate celebration, Atlanta's skyline twinkling beyond the windows like stars brought down to earth. Witnesses to a journey from destruction to rebuilding that few couples survive. Inside, both Whitford Tech executives and Google leadership mingled, symbolic of the bridge they'd built between their professional worlds. Connor maintained his position as CEO while working primarily from the California offices he'd established near Danielle's new headquarters. Their professional success made headlines, but it was their personal reconstruction that they celebrated tonight. "Ready?" Connor asked as the doors prepared to open. "Always," she replied, the single word containing their entire journey. They entered together to applause from friends and colleagues gathered to witness something few had thought possible, a true second chance. What does it take to forgive someone who once broke your heart completely? Is redemption possible after ultimate betrayal? Share your thoughts on whether love can truly be stronger the second time around. Later, the night winding down, Connor led her onto the balcony overlooking the Atlanta skyline. "I have something for you," he said, pressing a small velvet box into her palm. Inside wasn't a ring. She already wore that on her finger, the same one he'd given her years ago, found in the cabin's safe where he'd kept it throughout their separation. Instead, she found a key. "What's this?" she asked. "The lake house," he explained. "I've transferred it entirely to your name. No matter what happens, it's yours. A promise that you'll never again be left without choices." The gesture, the recognition of her need for security and independence, meant more than any diamond ever could. In the privacy of the presidential suite, the same one where they'd begun their journey back to each other, he unzipped her gown with reverent fingers. "Second chances," he murmured against her shoulder. She turned in his arms, smile luminous with certainty that had replaced doubt. "Last chances," she corrected, leading him toward forever for the second and final time. Their bodies moved together with the familiar rhythm of long-term lovers combined with the appreciative wonder of those who know what it means to lose each other. His hands traced her curves with reverence. Her fingers mapped the planes of his chest with gratitude. "I love you," he whispered against her skin, words they'd held back until now, saving them for when they could be offered without doubt or reservation. "I love you too," she answered, the simplicity of the phrase belying the complicated road they'd traveled to reach this point. Morning found them tangled together, The Atlanta sunrise painting gold across their intertwined forms. Outside, a new day began in the city that had witnessed their destruction and rebirth. If this journey of betrayal, vindication, and second chances touched something in you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that explore the complicated terrain of the heart. Tell me in the comments whether you believe some relationships are worth fighting for even after complete destruction. And remember, sometimes what appears to be an ending is merely the painful middle of a greater love story waiting to unfold.